The things I've heard about this talk in the last 24 hours. I can't wait. I'm worried I'm going to cry. I'm so excited you're back. And this martini is the best one I have had in a long time. That was in the elevator, and it was an empty martini glass. So I am so glad you are having fun, all the while doing the learning. So I have a PowerPoint only in the event I want to look half as smart as Dr. Lynn, but I don't have much of a PowerPoint, but just a little bit. This is just how to find me. I know many of you are on the Facebook Conversations with Kelly. You interact. I love it. I absolutely love it. My Instagram has changed since last time I was here at See My Grief, and then my podcast. So the way I like to talk is I want it to be interactive. I'll talk about a few things, and then I really want to open it up for questions and comments, which you have to do in your chat and in your Q&A. And we have our lovely moderators, Kathy and Janine, that'll be asking me. So I was asked to talk a little bit about what is anticipatory grief. Anticipatory grief starts the minute you get diagnosed. You hear the words, you have cancer, then you hear the words, it has metastasized, or it has recurred, or whatever that may be. Anticipatory grief is also called preparatory grief. So if you're caring for somebody that you know is going to die, you begin your grief experience prior to the death. I have worked with metastatic breast cancer for close to 30 years. And many of you know one of my dear clients, Judy Erdahl, who received an award here several years ago. Judy lived for many years with metastatic breast cancer, and we had this most beautiful talk about anticipatory grief. In the sense of, she said, you know, every time I log on to a chat room or a Facebook group, I can feel the grief because I'm watching one of my fellow metastatic sisters or brothers get weaker. I know that they are going to be transitioning into comfort care or hospice, and I'm already starting my grief process. And she said, what is that? And I said, that's called anticipatory grief, and it's very real. This could also be happening if you're noticing increased pain, increased symptoms, and knowing that you possibly may need to change your treatment. It's true, and I've heard many of my patients say, there's a grief, obviously, when we change treatments, not only because that could mean there's progression, but because what we know is where our comfort is. And the unknown is very uncomfortable for us. So we can start grieving that treatment change even if we're not sure it's going to happen. So grief isn't just about death. And let me just do a quick clarification. Our society has grief and loss backwards. So loss is the event. Loss is the diagnosis. Loss is the death. Loss is the change in jobs. Loss is the job loss, whatever that may be. Grief is our reaction. Society has it where they want to make grief the event. And they want us to button it up in a certain amount of time and be done with it. The loss is really a one-time event. You get the diagnosis, the death happens, the divorce happens, whatever that may be. And then our reaction can be a lifetime. Our reaction can be a lifetime, which is our response to this loss. Then we have mourning, which is what we will show the outside world of how we're experiencing grief, which is internal. What I often find is, and when the person said to me, I'm scared I'm going to cry, I said, well, I would invite you to do that. This would be an okay room to do that in. And I know that many people don't want to cry in front of their families. I know that we want to protect them, especially the little ones. I know that we want to protect them. We want to protect our family. We don't necessarily want to cry. We want to seem strong, whatever that may be. There's actually a chemical in the tears that we encourage people to cry. And there's a study done on tears, and if I was really cool, I'd have that graph up here, but I don't. I don't have the tear graph. But just believe me when I say there's a research on this. And we can look and we can study joy, grief, anger, sadness, and all these types of chemicals that are inside of tears. We want tears to come out. How many of you have started to cry and have apologized for it? Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm gonna cry. I'd encourage you the next time you feel the tears coming to just sit with it and say instead, I'm having a natural reaction to something that's really intense. Because truly, if you think about what you go through day to day, whether you have chronic pain, whether you have chronic nausea, whether you're waiting for your scan, whether you're going into a scan, whatever that may be, there may be a relief in your ability to cry. So I just want you to know that anticipatory grief could be something many of you are living in. It's not only about how long do I have to live. It's about the cumulative losses and the grief that we experience as being part of this community. I get called often to help when there has been a death of a metastatic breast cancer human who was very impactful in the community. And every single time I've come on to do those events, there are other names that are coming in that have happened since I was called to do that event. So then what we do is and people say, how can I deal with all this grief? How can I deal with this cumulative grief that is happening to us every single day? And what we really want to do is first of all, we want to name it. We want to name it. We want to say it out loud because we know that there are going to be more losses that we're going to have to face. But we want to break those down into individuals. So if you are here and it's heavy on your heart that you've lost 5 people this year already that you were close to, I know many more have died, but you've lost 5. Please let each person have their own space in that grief. And then, of course, our lives happen outside of the metastatic community. So we may lose people in our own lives that we are close to, but I certainly wanted to address today that I have a lot of empathy for the amount of loss that can happen. And again, it's not only death. It's you're really close to somebody in your group, and you've gotten to know that maybe you've never met them. That's one of the most beautiful things that we saw through the pandemic, and it's really hard for me to list beautiful things that happened, but that's one of them, where I saw the amount of connection that could happen when people can hold space for each other virtually. So it might be that your friend that you care so much about is not able to eat because of mouth sores. And they have a wedding coming up and they can't enjoy that wedding, and on and on and on. So let's start acknowledging grief and loss for all things, not just death. Not just death. And what we know is when the primary loss happens, so that would be you're diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. Your loved one is diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. There are multiple secondary losses that come in that happen. It's a result of the primary. So the primary, again, is your diagnosis. The secondaries can be things like you're too tired to go to your daughter's karate. You have such bad neuropathy in your feet that you can't continue going on your walks with your neighbors. You may have such debilitating headaches that you can no longer work. You are so fatigued that you have to retire early. You go into medical menopause, and you can no longer have children biologically like you wanted. So those are secondary losses. Your friend dies, And that's the person you would call every single day who got it. You were diagnosed the same time, you had the same type of cancer. She was the only one who got you. So now you have this secondary loss from that death. Please acknowledge these as just as important. They can hurt. And one of the things I want to say too about anticipatory grief and grief that has already happened, preparatory grief, you can be in that space and have both at the same time. So you can be grieving for something that's already happened and grieving for something that you're anticipating happening. That's where you need extra support and extra care. So much of what I talk about with people is that we can create space for both to be true. Is Martha Carlson here by chance? Oh, this was going to be her time to shine, Martha. Okay, well, Martha has written about this, and I was floored that she writes for Cure. And she wrote that one time I was at a conference and I talked about both and concept. And she said, oh my goodness. And she wrote about it, and the way she wrote about it was much better than the way I say it. So I was hoping she could be here and say it because it sounds better when she writes it. But the concept is, in one space, both things can be true. You can be hopeful and still scared. You can be grieving for somebody and still happy that you got good news. You can be angry and still hopeful. You can be grateful and still upset. So often, we are asked to be one or the other. We're judged if we're not one of the ways. And I just want to tell you that I'd love for you to create space in your life for many things to happen at once. That you get to be grateful and still really upset. And I was once told by a patient that if positive thinking cured cancer, they would have never gotten it in the first place. And they said, so now I sit, I drink a green juice, I say positive things, and I put up my middle finger. Nothing against green juice. I know, I'm not sure if Rachel's still here. I still support green juice. But I am very much like, the amount of pressure that people living with cancer face. Don't have these hard emotions because it's gonna this, that, and the other. And I wanna tell you, have the hard emotions because it actually is going to help you. Have them, share them, let someone hold space for them, but also know, even with those difficult emotions, there is space for other. And so it's really true in grief. And I know I've worked with many people. My specialty as a therapist is oncology and grief work. And I guess out of all the cancers, probably metastatic breast and brain and ovarian are probably the three highest that I've worked with. And what is so interesting for me is when people come in and say, I feel terrible that I'm doing so well. I was diagnosed like 10 years before her. Why am I doing so well? And I'm seeing a lot of heads shaking. The survivor guilt piece. It's important to acknowledge that because that's a grief for you in and of itself. I want to say, though, that there's space for you to hold with your friend and to support your friend and to feel empathy for your friend and to feel sadness for your friend, all the while being really grateful and happy for yourself. It does not take away from your support and your love of your friend when you yourself are feeling joyful about your cancer. Having attended many metastatic breast cancer conferences, we saw it today. We saw when people stood up because they had lived 5 years, and the whole room erupts. This isn't a place where we go, oh, why can't that be me? This is a place where we go, oh, that could be me. Oh, I'm so hopeful that'll be me. I'm so happy for her or so happy for him. Sometimes you're at sales conferences, not to knock any of the salespeople in here. You are very important to this world. But sometimes we're at these events. I don't go to a lot of sales conferences, I have to tell you that, but I've been to a couple. And there's this energy a little bit like, oh, you know, Diane sold 6 million. Oh, yay, Diane. And then, you know, and Dave sold 2 million. Oh, that's great, Dave. I'm over here with 500 grand and I'm not getting a trophy. That's not what I saw today. So I think it's so important when you feel that survivor's guilt to honor it, to hold it, but also to be very joyful. Because from what I can tell, this is a roller coaster ride. Sometimes you're here, and sometimes you're up here anticipating the fall. And it's amazing how many people are on that ride with you. So as you've maybe noticed, I have this, oh my God, I knew how to go backwards. Sorry, I don't normally do these things. Okay, so there's this wave that you can see. I wanted to talk about this at the beginning, and I forgot this. I use healing, and for many of you, you've come up to me and said that you've seen mine and Brian Pyatt's Facebook Lives, where we're on Conversations with Kelly the first Monday of every month. We just do a Facebook Live on healing topics. And we often talk about this wave. The wave is a metaphor. So whether you are grieving a loss of a person, a loss of your health, a loss of a limb, a loss of ability, a loss of love, whatever it may be, we ride these waves. If any of you have body surfed, you know that if you're on the peak of the wave, which is, we'll just say that's when the intensity is happening, if you try to get off that wave and go back, you will go under. What's beautiful about the waves is they always end up at the shore. Your people, this conference, LBBC, your physician, your faith, your spirituality is your shore. And I want you to remember, and if for just a second, would you all just take a minute and look around this room? I know this is a silly exercise because you've been sitting in it, but I want you just to look around. Some faces you know, some faces you don't, but this is your shore. And so when it feels hard next time and you feel like you're at the peak and you're scared and you're changing treatments, or the Mets have gone to your liver and that has been your biggest fear, or maybe it's in your brain and you're worried about Gamma Knife, whatever it may be, let yourself lean into that wave, ride it, and then you will arrive to your people and to your shore. And it doesn't have to be a room full like this, because I mean, this would be like a really incredible shore. But a lot of times, it only takes one person or two people to hold that space with us. And that's a beautiful imagery, by the way. When you're really worried and you feel like that you're on the peak, imagine your person or your people on the shore waiting. That wave always lets off. Always. If you watch oceans, the wave will always subside. Is any of this making sense? Oh, that's good, because I don't have another talk planned, so that's really good. We're going to get to questions and answers in a couple minutes, but I want you to do something with me. I want you to take And this has to be like universal. So I want you to take the tablets in the middle of the table with a pen. So everybody has the same kind of paper. This is going to be anonymous. I'd really encourage all of you to do this, caregivers included. If you're at a table of 1, would you just scoot over? Or if you're at a table of 2, just be mindful because this is supposed to be anonymous, but if you're at a table of 2, you're probably going to know. So for those of you that are living with metastatic breast cancer, this is what I'd like you to write on the top. Diagnosis with metastatic cancer, metastatic breast cancer. And if you're a caregiver, write your person's name was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. So that's the title on the top. Then we're just going to take 30 seconds to a minute, and under that, I'd like you to write the losses you've experienced as a result of this. And I'd like you to be really honest, and nothing's off the table. What do you feel? Sadness, anger, confusion, defeat, whatever that may be, just please write those under there. Maybe just tune in. What does it feel like to write this? Have you ever told anyone this? And if you're at home, I'd encourage you to write this list down as well. Whether you're a caregiver or someone living with. And then if you would, fold it up as tightly as you can get it. And if you're at home, feel free to fold it as well. It's about the ritual of it. And after you fold it really tightly, I'm going to ask you put it in the middle of the table. Again, no names, no identifiers, nothing. And then who's ever able at the table, see, you guys, you were like advanced classes, weren't you? How you figured that out?
Just being an adult, it just kind of worked out that way.
Not for everybody. But anyways, so she said being an adult, that we figured that out. Put them in the center, and then who's ever able, would one person kind of mix those around? I love it. I love that. So, what I would ask you to do once this talk's done is I'd ask you to pick one up. Hopefully it's not yours, but if it is, then you hold space for yourself. And I'm going to ask you to put energy into that and well wishes and good thoughts and whatever. But what you're doing is you're helping someone else carry the burdens, the losses, the sadness. And our job is not to fix it for people. Our job is to help hold space and help them carry. And you don't have to know this person. In fact, you won't know this person. But there's a lot of energy in that. And when you're the one and I love watching this actually, if you're the one that's surrendering these things and giving that up, just know that someone else now is going to take these. It's not that you're carrying someone else's burden, is that you're providing a space to carry it. And then whenever you're done with it, you don't even have to read it if you don't want. Truly, this isn't about. It's just about seeing someone's grief, which is so important. We want to be seen. when we're struggling with this, I know many of us in this society are taught to do this alone. You will not heal if you do this alone. So it's about having other people and allowing other people. The people that I see that do the best with their cancer treatments are the ones that have mentally allowed other people in. And it's the people that have let their vulnerability be a gateway and a portal for other people to come in, actually end up doing better overall with their treatments, their fatigue, their symptoms, all of that. Because our body, what it will have to do is use the energy that's already limited for dealing with the emotional, the stress, the cortisol, whatever the hormones that are releasing when we're sad and stressed. And we're trying to maneuver all that. There is a positive energy in saying it and writing it. It actually allows room then for other healing. So your grief is valid. And I want to say that I get often from the metastatic community. My family doesn't understand why I'm so sad because I never even met her. We've never even met in person. They don't understand why I'm so sad. And I just want to tell you that it's not our job to make someone else comfortable with our story. It's just our job to allow it and to let it be valid. And I can 100% understand, for many reasons, why you losing somebody that you've never met on those metastatic support groups can be devastating. And what you want to do is find the people that would understand that. And when they keep happening and there's cumulative losses or cumulative changes in treatment or cumulative side effects or cumulative things that are happening that you're sad about, allow yourself one by one to acknowledge those. I did a group, I'm trying to remember who it was with. There were several metastatic, I've done this with a couple groups, but it was a pancreatic group that I got called in to do, and they had had multiple people die, and they were really struggling, and it was really hard for them to find hope when everybody is dying. Okay. So we have to remember, okay, and one of the things I would tell my patients is, his story is not your story. Your story is your own story. But also we needed to find ways to individualize the grief because all of them were hard and all of them were important. And so we came up with, as a group, they actually went out and got rocks out of their garden, whatever. Don't steal them from places. I guess that's bad. I did that once. You can't go to public places, I guess, and take a bunch of rocks. Isn't that weird? Well, in Minnesota you can't. I don't know, maybe in Philly they're a little more liberal. But you write down with a Sharpie the person's name. Now this is going to sound goofy to people, and that's okay. But trust me that it works. You write their name down, then you create a little altar or you have a space outside with all these names, and I still, year after year after year, I add to my rock garden. When I go by them, I might say their name. It's really important. We want to say the name. And they're shaking heads. We want to say the name. So if you see the family member of this person who died, please remember that when you say their name, you're reminding that family that they lived, not just that they died. And everybody wants to be remembered that they lived and that they made a difference. And so we have this rock garden, or whatever comes to your mind, but each individual loss deserves its own space. And you walk by and you say the name. You might just say it, and I've got them all around this tree. Time goes really fast up here. Okay, so Thank you for listening. Oh, okay, please. Okay. Sorry, I just don't like these. So I did write this quote, and I want you just to, before we get to questions, I just want you to take this in. Grief is as natural a reaction to loving something or someone deeply. It should not be seen as a disease, rather an experience to hold with non-judging and very gentle hands. I hope you, in your entire metastatic experience, and especially for those of you that are newly diagnosed, like I've heard there are some people that are here that were diagnosed within the last month. First of all, welcome. Secondly, I hope you are holding yourself with very, very gentle hands. And not thinking, how am I going to do that? I got to get involved. I got to do this. I got to do that. Right now is about breathing, getting your information, always letting hope be your companion, honoring the grief, honoring the shock. Ask somebody to help you hold whatever it is. But I hope every single one of you in here is holding your story with gentle hands. And if you haven't been, maybe this is your opportunity to do so. I will open it up now for questions, comments. Janine, I'm supposed to cue you.
Sure, I would be happy to ask the first question. What do you say to someone questioning why I'm not crying all the time? This happened to me and I have my own answer, but thought it might help others as well.
Okay. Well, I love when people tell me they have their own answer, because then I'm like, are you going to like my answer or what? So I want you to stick with your answer, but I'll add 2 cents. Crying is not the only way we grieve. And it's a real judgy thing when people start judging. I see it all the time. I consult with several funeral homes. And I see families saying, you didn't love Dad as much as I love Dad because you're not even crying. So what I want to say is crying is one way to express. The thing I will ask people, though, is there could be a variety of reasons why you don't cry. Some, it's physiological. Some of us do not cry as much as others. Some of us cry if a little kitty runs across the screen and a little kitty cat. Okay, and we just cry. But the one thing I'd want to ask you, and you'd have to be really honest with yourself, are you not crying for the benefit of another person? So that they don't feel sad, or that they don't have reactions. Because that's where then we want to do the work. We want to lean into what we are feeling. And if it doesn't feel safe to cry with somebody maybe that you live with or your sister or whomever, I hope you can find somebody that you feel safe with. However, crying is not the only way we grieve. So I hope that was helpful. Next question.
Okay. Kelly, you have conversations with Kelly on Monday nights, is that right?
Yeah, so on Monday nights, virtually the first Monday, which is coming up, if you go to Facebook and you follow Conversations with Kelly, it should alert you. But at 6 p.m. Central Time, Brian Pyatt and I always do a topic, and it's not like Zoom. We just are talking about a topic, and people can chime in and ask questions. Some topics might pertain to you, some may not, but you're all invited. I would love that. Otherwise, the Conversations with Kelly live are in Minneapolis, for the most part, unless I'm traveling around talking.
And someone saw your documentary, Dying is Not Giving Up. Would you say where that might be available now? And
so the question
explain.
is about the documentary Dying is Not Giving Up, which features Judy Erdahl, who was living and dying with metastatic breast cancer. Judy actually had a form of cancer for close to 20 years. And she felt it was very important to educate medical professionals, particularly those in med school, nursing school, PA school, et cetera, about how to have difficult conversations with patients, particularly for those at the end of life. So it's a 35-minute documentary where I'm at the bedside. Judy's talking. We interview her oncologist. We interview her family. And it is, her wisdom is beyond brilliant and beautiful. And Judy talks a lot in there about there's hope even until the end. And it's true. And so we tend to have periodic virtual screenings. Just watch my social media for that. There is opportunity for people to have like a one-time screening, but we don't have it for licensing purposes and all that. We don't have it on the website. So you can get it on my website, information about it. It's actually a really good conversation starter with families. Families have sat down and watched it. And it's a beautiful way to, the bottom line is be empowered. And Judy talks in there a lot about, I want to make sure I made a difference. And it doesn't have to be big, like you started a foundation. It can be that you sat with somebody out here on the couch and you listened to their story. You're holding their space. That's making a difference. So it's beautiful. Thank you for asking. I know many of you in here have seen it. The title can be a little, but that was, Judy named it from her chemo chair. So she just said, dying is not giving up. I'm not giving up. And there's not this battle that she lost and cancer won. So I just think that some of the language that she helps us with is beautiful. So are there more questions? Okay. Go ahead.
Our next question is from a parent who is asking, how can we prepare our children for our death and help them prepare for their own grief?
Thank you for asking that question. It's one that I get asked every talk that I do. So without knowing the age of the child, I'm going to kind of give a general sweep. If kiddos are old enough to attach, which they do at a day old, or even before they're born, they're old enough to feel. They're old enough to feel grief. We know that if there's a death in a family, that even the babies will react. They'll become more fussy. They might not want to eat. There's behavioral changes. So we know that if you're old enough to love, you're old enough to grieve. Okay? And so I am not a fan of protecting children at 100%. I think, I think it's important that we consider ages, obviously, and you know your child. But we want to use words like cancer, okay? If we start talking about boogeymen and monsters, it can lead to a lot of issues. So we want to talk about the word. There's something that's called cancer, and you can, again, how young they are, but start preparing them in that way. Some people I've worked with, their child's never known them without cancer, right? So they got diagnosed when the baby was 6 weeks old. They have had metastatic disease. I'm working with somebody, I just worked with somebody, they're 15 years out, metastatic disease, the child's 15. The child has never not known his mother to not have cancer. He has said, if I wasn't told it was cancer, I would have felt left out of the family because everybody's talking about this thing. And if I wasn't included growing up, I would have felt left out. Well, that's interesting. And he said, and I probably would have come up with a really bad fill in the blank, what was happening. So we ask children, I think here's the thing with kids. Here's the thing with all of us, really. Ask them, what do you know? Mommy goes to the doctor. Daddy goes to the doctor. Do you know why I go to the doctor? Yeah, you have, and then the port and all of the different things. Ask them what they know and go from there. With teenagers now, I'm finding it very helpful to have text conversations. Now, this sounds nuts, But good luck sitting them down and having a hard conversation. We want to do that if we can, but I also know that I have had many successful stories with texting. I went to the doctor today, this is the update, da 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 da. Would you be open to like talking about it on Saturday or have questions? We can also have a family journal where you can write down the things that came up and then they can write their questions and responses. Again, you know your child. Some children are very capable of sitting, but it can be very uncomfortable. The basic thing though with kiddos is they're part of the family. If you are at the end of your life, if you are in a hospice situation, we want to give those kids the opportunities that they will never get back after death. And we want them to have the opportunities to say, I love you, I'm sorry I was mean to you, please forgive me for breaking the, whatever that may be. Because as somebody whose mother died suddenly at 11, and not having that opportunity with her created a lot of unnecessary suffering. So as hard as it may be, it actually is a huge gift to be able to have those conversations with your family. Now, if the child is, I don't want to hear this, I don't want to hear this, we don't have to shove this in anybody's face. We monitor the kiddos, but let's give them the chance. Let's give them the chance. There is lots of groups out there for grieving children, at least. The Dougie Center, the National Alliance for Grieving Children, these are national, where you can actually go on and they talk about how to have hard conversations. There's worksheets you can print off. It doesn't have to be only around after someone dies, because these are difficult conversations. You can do the exercise we did today. Write down the things that are really hard for you after mommy's diagnosis. And then we'll put it in this family basket. These are just little things that I think are important. What we're doing is, and if, the last thing we want to do too is give kids the message, we don't cry in this house. We don't have big emotions in this house, because that will create a lot of issues for them growing up. So we want to mirror for them. I tell grieving parents all the time, absolutely it's okay for you to cry in front of your child. Not hysterically and not expecting them necessarily to console you. And when I say hysterically, I mean like screaming at them, take out the garbage and all this kind of stuff. It's more about crying about what's happening. Maybe you got difficult news at your oncologist's office. They're going to be scared. So we also want to reassure them. And what we kind of do is have them write down 4 people. Maybe it's uncle this, auntie that, cousin so-and-so. And then they can refer to that chart. Here's who you'll look at when you're feeling scared or sad. These are other people besides mom and dad or grandma and grandpa or mom and mom or whomever that you can talk to. But the bottom line is, if the kiddo is old enough to love, they're old enough to feel what's going on. And it will be much better for them if they have an opportunity, even when it's really scary stuff. It's also okay, given the age, if they go to one of your appointments with you. More?
Yes.
Okay. We have 3 minutes and 47 seconds.
Okay. Well, I'm sure this won't take long, but how does one help their husband and their parents?
Okay. You know what is so beautiful about these questions and so telling, especially with the disease that impacts, I know there are men here impacted by this disease in terms of living with metastatic breast cancer. But when you have a disease that is primarily female, a lot of the questions I get are, how do I take care of other people? And that just goes to show, right? Like that's kind of the thing we do. And How do you take care of your partner? Similar to the kids, is make sure you can be authentic in front of them. Even if they don't respond to you in the way you want them to respond, I don't want that to shut people down. Because if you're authentic with them, my hope is they'll be authentic with you. It is not a bad thing to go into some couples counseling. And that doesn't mean you have a bad partnership or marriage. It means that this is a really stressful thing that happens to couples. Another thing is you may have to say to your partner, I'm really concerned about you, and by being concerned about you, I feel like it's impacting me in a negative way. And it's because you're not taking care of yourself. And I want to be able to, because you want me to take care of myself by going to my doctor's appointments, and by doing the things they're encouraging me to do. I need you to do the same. And we have this, I was talking to Ed, who's walking over there right now. I was talking to Ed about this, but we have a great organization in Minneapolis called Jack's Caregivers, which is specifically for male caregivers. Now they're adding Jill's as well. But what happens when they get together and they're all caring for their wives or partners who have generally metastatic cancer, but they've now changed it, the amount of emotion. And they do really cool things. They go to breweries, they axe throw, they do all these things. And then they have the emotional component. But I want to talk to the caregivers in the room real quick and just let you know that your person will do better, physically, mentally, all of it, if you are doing okay. And I know it's scary. I know it's scary to lean in and to get help for yourself. But it is actually, if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for them. Because they actually will do better if you, and if, you know, in 43 seconds, I have to say that I could talk for a whole hour on this. It's scary. That's why we don't get help. We don't want to, they don't make it real if we get help. But I just want to say that this really is, it takes a village to do this, and you are a very important part of the village as the caregiver. So for the caregivers here, a huge shout out to you. Yes. And if you don't have a caregiver here, that doesn't mean they don't love you, okay? Now, can I get 2 seconds just to read this? Our light's gonna go off and stuff. No, okay. So I just wanna read real quick. I am gonna be out doing a book signing for a little bit and just stop out and say hi. But this is actually from my book, A Comforted Heart. I know many of you have the book or have heard of it, and thank you for your comments that you've given me. So often I hear, what a ride this is. This refers to the reactions people have in relation to difficult life experiences. This reaction to something or someone that we've lost is called grief. In our initial grief, we experience many conflicting thoughts and feelings. People often ask me if I think they're going crazy. Because one minute they feel okay and centered, and the next minute they feel like their world is coming undone. Anybody relate? Yeah, me too. For the rest of our lives, we will experience feelings around this loss. This actually is more common than not. As time passes, so will the extremes of the highs and the lows of our grief. Like the waves of the ocean, our waves of emotion will peak and subside. You will find that there will always be an energy of movement within your ocean of grief. However, time allows for more calming waves than those that come crashing down in your moments of initial grief or diagnosis. I wish you peace as you navigate your waves. Remember your spirituality, your family, your friends, your pets, your community, and anything else that supports you. These people will be on your shore where you can come back and find comfort. You are never alone. Thank you.